Good news guys, Comiket, Japan's biggest anime doujin event, is slated to happen again this year in the middle of August. Okay, yeah, maybe that bit was a little funny in my head. And with the fact that pandemic restrictions have slowly been winding down, we're seeing the event reduce the restrictions it's putting on participants as well now. That said, some of the changes it would seem that they are actually willing and very much want to keep due to the fact that it actually, according to them, changed the event for the better. So, I figured, what better time to reminiscent about the good old days than today when we can look back at how not so good some prompts of the events were, and as a result, why they felt like some of the changes were necessary and why some things may never go back to the way they were before. This is a little hot to be wearing in summer. Let me get changed out of this real quick. But if anything, I'm actually very positive about how the event has changed now. Positive that because of the fact that these changes have been implemented, in spite of the fact that some people obviously will suffer due to the fact that the event is not paid entry, that it would overall solve many of the underlying problems. So for the sake of those who don't know and who just clicked on this video because it looked like it might be an interesting topic, let me just give a quick explanation of the main things we'll be talking about today. So Comiket, or Comic Market, is the biggest anime doujin event in Japan. If you do not know what doujin means, it just means something that's created by an individual. So anything indie, essentially, we also consider a doujin work. And with this event, it doesn't just have to be anime specific, because you also do find stuff by either military nerds or trade nerds, so on and so forth. Basically, all the different hobbyist groups come together in this event to produce their own content, to sell, to talk to people, and to generally just have a good time and form fun relationships with the people who they interact with. The issue with the event and why I'm making this video is due to the fact that prior to the pandemic, the queuing situation in this event got to such insane levels that if you arrive at the venue at 10 AM, which is the time that they stated that the event would open up to normal attendees, there is a very high chance that if you wanted to get something, it might already be sold out, especially for the more popular circles or for official goods for more popular series as well. In fact, it's actually so bad that even if you came on the first train, you may not get the thing you want. So if you arrive at the venue at 4:30 AM, there's still that risk. And even if you camped from 8 PM the previous day, which is very illegal by the way, there's still a very real chance that you might not actually be able to get what you want. And when you think about it, that's pretty insane, right? Because if even the people who are camping overnight aren't getting the items, then who is? I mean, is there some kind of secret smart society hidden underground that is secretly trying to stockpile all of the world's smart before anyone else can get it? We're gonna explore that later in this video. Though another reason why I wanted to make this video is due to the fact that in the previous video I made on Comiket 102's changes, I also referenced a video by a Japanese YouTuber, his channel's over here, who went down to Comiket in the past in the middle of the night just to lambast these people who camped overnight. And he came to a bunch of realizations on the spot, some of the stuff he didn't believe himself, and then eventually got kicked out. And that actually got me thinking that, like, if this, or what his perspective of the event is what people consider to be the average understanding of what the event's queues are like, then I probably know more about this event than the majority of these people in Japan as well. For you see, even before the pandemic, I had been going to this event for about 10 years, which I know that makes me sound kind of old, but
soon my life will be over.
No jokes aside, this also means that since I've been going through it for about 10 years, I've gone to at least 20 of these events before the pandemic hit as well. So as a result, I've tried probably the most variety in the number of ways to queue for the event than the majority of people who have gone for it have. Like, most people typically stick to one or the other. They either go overnight or they go on the first train or so on and so forth. I've tried everything from overnight, which I know it's wrong now. Many years ago, 10 years ago, it didn't strike me as hard, but now I understand. Okay, my apologies to people who are shocked by this now. But that aside, suffice to say, I'm probably one of the people who has done the most research into the different ways of queuing, and although the big issue now is that a lot of the information has been lost since websites have been deleted over time since all those years ago where I attended the event, but I'll try my best to recount everything now so that you can understand, all of you wonderful people, why actually getting to the front of the queue in this event is impossible. Well, for me as well, of course, but for the dramatic purposes and all, why it would be impossible for you to get to the front of the event. So I was thinking of how best to classify this, because there are actually multiple ways that you can actually get to the event itself, all of which are pretty grey except for a small few of very nice people. And so I was thinking of how best to do this. Of course, we could go with an iceberg, but at this point that shit feels a little too corny, so I didn't want to do that. So instead, what I have prepared here is the 9 circles of hell from Dante's Inferno, since, this is clearly gonna be something that's even less old than using an iceberg, right? Though the idea of all of this was a lot funnier in my head back when I was planning it out and recording the video than it is now when I'm actually editing it. So just to be clear, I'm not wishing death upon any of these people, nor am I asking anyone to do the same to them, because doing that would also mean to be wishing death upon myself, and I kind of do like existing right now, so would prefer not for that to happen. But all of this is mainly just for the comedic purpose of it all, since I just really don't want to use an iceberg because it feels a little too overused. And that said, this original image of the 9 circles also feels a bit too convoluted to use in this video, so I'm gonna simplify it down to this, the 9 circles of Comiket Kuma Hell instead. I mean, for all those of you who have been to the event and are in one of these tiers, which we'll go over after this, touch your heart, alright? We might all go to hell, and if we do, maybe we can just sit in a condo in hell and drink a tequila or something, or we talk it out there, okay? Anyway, back to the video. But of course, there are also good people who do the right thing, and obviously they won't be here, they will be above the 9 layers of hell, so we won't be classifying them in this. But basically in the rest of this, we'll be classifying every other group that infringes on this to some extent in some way or another, either breaching the trust that the organizations of the events have put into organizing this for everyone to have a good time, or just the people who are selfish pricks in varying levels of law-breakingness. So we'll begin real quick with the people at the very tippy top who are not going to Comiket Hell, which are the people who attend the event in a respectable way. And by this, I mean people who are not actively coming and queuing for extended periods of time, and as a result putting themselves at danger, as well as causing the need for people to take even more extreme measures to try to get to the front of the queue. For you see, no matter how much a person tries to compete in a way that would make sense, in the end, due to the fact that there's a constantly increasing number of people attending this event back then, as a result, we will eventually reach the point where people will start to take more and more extreme measures due to the fact that if everyone is trying to camp to come at the earliest possible legal time, eventually it doesn't make sense because people are gonna lose out one way or the other. And so when I talk about this first group, I'm talking about the people who are coming at a time that is considerably more respectful to the original designs of the event. And what I mean by this is, how best can we gauge when would be a good time to come for this event then? Like, what would be considered this socially respectable or more preferred time that I've been talking about till now? And I think the best way we can do this is to use every other event that exists as an example. Because really, if every other event can do it consistently, so should Comiket, right? They should be held to the same standard, especially considering the fact that Comiket is the biggest event receiving the most amount of money from the charging of the tables for its participants. It used to receive the most advertising money as well from advertisers at the event. It used to receive money from corporations to set up booths there. With all the money that they are getting, which all these other events do not, it feels like they should be at the minimum held to the same standard, if not a higher one, since most of the smaller events that I usually talk about, many of them don't even get corporate money for the running of their events. So while we might think that, like, yeah, the scale is bigger, it should be more difficult to organize, but they have more money and they have like close to 50 years of experience trying to organize stuff like this, and therefore we will be using 8 a.m. as the time that I feel would be a good way to judge when people should be coming for this event. The reason why I use 8 a.m. is because it's about 2.5 hours before the event's actual start time at 10:30, which for most other events, this is about the average time when the earliest people at the event would arrive. Now, you might realize that I'm saying the earliest for the other events, and the reason why it ends up like this is because Comiket is the only event that does not penalize people who come too early. That is to say, if you come like overnight, they do not penalize you as they should be. Whereas with most other events, if you come too early, they will intentionally set up a dummy queue with which they will then use to punish all the people who come too early. And as a result, there is an understanding among all participants that you don't want to do that if you actually want to get the stuff you want and not look like an utter clown as everyone else walks in past you and looks at you and goes like, ha ha, or something like that. And 8 a.m. is also a pretty nice number for when people will be socially up and about in a normal day as well. If you are a very overworked salaryman, I'm not looking at myself, then you would typically be going out to work around this time unless you live in Saitama and work in Tokyo or something. But otherwise, an hour for you to get to work at 9 a.m. is a pretty reasonable time. More often than not, most people do leave about then to go to work. You might think that maybe I'm being too harsh, that considering the size of Comiket, maybe 2.5 hours is a bit unfair since most of the average other events are doing this as well. But you have to understand, there's way worse. Like the strictest events I know, I think like 2 hours earlier than the event that you can arrive, and anyone before that gets penalized, which means for those events, since some of them start at 11 p.m., you can only be there post 9 a.m. or post 9:30 for some of them, and if you're any earlier, they'll actually punish you. So when we talk about the people who come at 8 a.m. who are not going to Comiket Hell, we're basically talking about one, the cosplayers, since cosplayers typically have to attend the event through a separate queue, which makes it impossible for them to queue for the goods in the first place as well as the doujin stuff. So as a result, they're putting themselves into a completely separate group from most of the people who are competing and causing this queue extension, so they're exempt. The rest are the normal attendees who also attend at this time, and the circles who typically have to arrive around 8:30 to begin setup as well. Though with the circles, there is a bit of an issue as well. That doesn't affect all of them, just a small minority. So we'll be talking about that way deeper in the layers later on. Though yeah, with this first group of people, there isn't really too much to say other than nice! So let's start with the topmost layer, and this is probably the only one that has any form of semblance to the actual Dante's Inferno, in the sense that this is the most benign layer and the only one where whether or not these people even belong in this Comiket Hell is even a little questionable. In fact, Dante put in the topmost layer Limbo the people that he actually idolized and thought were good people, but who were not Christians and therefore ended up in this situation. So when you look at his presentation of these people, whether or not they even belong is arguable. And indeed, the first group we're going to be talking about is the people that come by the first train, which some people might argue, wait a minute, no, if you look at the rules for Comiket, it says not to come before 4:30 in the fine print over here, and therefore it shouldn't be an issue that these people are doing what they're doing. But when you look at the overarching issue at hand, the entire statement that's written there, it actually states this as one of the sub-points of the bigger point for the rules that you should take note of for Comiket, which is just to not be a dick, to not cause trouble for everyone else. And when you think about it, when it comes to causing trouble for the people around you, particularly people who are not participating within the event itself, it feels like the concept of tens of thousands of people rushing to take the first train to the event and then causing this to happen at the train station itself is quite a form of troublemaking as well, isn't it? However, I feel like the reason why this is never stated within the fine print of the book itself is due to the fact that these people, while they are trying to beat the queue, are still the most benign group of queue fighters, I guess we can call them. They're like freedom fighters, except they fight for their freedom to be at the front of the queue. And when you look at that one Japanese YouTuber's video as well, he lambasted the people who came overnight by saying, hey, you do know that your actions are causing a trouble for the people who come by the first train, right? Because they take all that effort to come by the train, and you're taking their spot in the line instead in front of them. Now, ignoring the fact that it's probably even more hellish to camp overnight, there is also the fact that it would seem that in the general perception now, coming by the first train is something that is looked at as not being all that bad either. If you think about it, if they were to state in the catalog rules that you should not even come, like, let's say before 8 a.m., for example, people are likelier to point out that these people who are coming by first train are not an issue because all of these even bigger problems exist, and this would probably bring to light all of the bigger issues that they're not fixing, because if they start to point out that the people on the first train are an issue, these people would probably also go ballistic. Everyone who would come before 8 a.m., for example, and they would point out that the overnight people exist, and the overnight people who are getting even more hate than before would then start to point towards the fact that, but wait, you are doing even more of these things that are a problem, and then it will probably spill over to show all of the bigger issues that they do not want coming to light, and therefore why it's written like this. If we think of a hypothetical situation where you manage to get rid of everyone who beats the first train and the people who come on the first train are the first people at the event, wouldn't the people who are doing this at 4:30 in the morning become the biggest nuisance then? Because in the end, they are still causing the trains to jam up, because one thing you have to understand is by the time the trains get close to these locations, they tend to be so full of people that the normal people who are going about their daily lives would not be able to board the trains. They are doing this and sharing at 4:30 in an area where residential and hotels exist. So in the end, people are still being troubled by all this happening. And if you take all of the people who used to camp overnight, which, yes, I actually counted it, took a long time back then, but with the power of math, I managed to count that there were maybe approximately like 7 to 10,000 people depending on the year and whether or not it was winter or summer. So if you take those 7 to 10,000 people and put them into the first train period as well, what do you think is going to happen to the public transport system? More importantly, what do you think is going to happen to the culture of people who come at this timing if you take the people who are desperate enough to not only go overnight, but cut the line or fight with others overnight just to get ahead into the first train? It's going to make the situation even worse, isn't it? And like the moment all of that is gone, it feels like the concept of people coming at the first train would also eventually come under flag. When people complain about the overnight group, it feels more like this, obviously it is a bad thing. It's way worse than coming at first train, but it's due to the fact that this common enemy exists, that people don't think that this thing below is an issue yet. But when that is gone and people start to compare the fact that this event still has a first train issue, where there is a potential health hazard of people running and potentially stampeding each other at the event, compared to most other events where you can probably go at the opening time and still be able to easily enter, it might eventually clamp down on them as well, which is why they are at the first tier. And some people consider it a tradition of the event for people to want to see this happen as well, so it's not too bad. But then again, you start to think about it, they are still causing the same issues that the overnight groups are causing, just at a smaller scale. And if you think about it, how did this even become a tradition where people will watch them rush in like this if there wasn't a huge group of people to beat the train and film these people coming in enough to create the hype that would cause this to become a tradition? I don't know. It's a very confusing thing, which for now we can just put it aside. Arguably, it feels like once every other group has been dealt with, this needs to be looked at as well, is my opinion, but we'll put them aside for now because this whole video is going to be really long and we have many other groups that we need to talk about more than this, guys. So the next group we're going into is the first group that is essentially breaking the event's rules, which are the people who are precisely aiming to just beat the first train arrival people, and so try to mingle in and pretend to be one of them. And these are the people who basically have access to some other form of transportation that allows them to find a way to arrive at the venue just before the first train people do, I have tried this as well among with some of my other friends, and there are many ways that people go about it. The way I used to do it was that we would literally just cycle down like a 40-minute bike ride, just pedaling all the way there, and then we would just park our bikes in one of the legal bike stopping areas, and then we would just sit around on a bench somewhere and wait for the first train people to leave the station, and then we were just like, okay, we'll walk towards the queue as well. And then there's the other group, which are the people who basically spend money on buses that are actually operating intentionally to get you in just before the first train, where they essentially have a bus where you would pay money to board the bus, and the bus would park somewhere until like 4 a.m. or something around there. And while you're in the bus, you have a good safe place to sleep. You have access to a proper toilet with not too many people competing with you for it. And I think it also had a shower, so you were in a pretty good spot. And for the most part, you're basically just renting a vehicle to sleep in until the event's first train people arrive, and then the bus just drives to the location so that your entire bus of people can enter the event before everyone else. So they're essentially paying to win, but then again, I'm poor, so I don't really get to complain about what these people were doing when I was doing the same thing except with a bicycle instead. But yeah, at this point, it's still relatively benign because these people aren't exactly causing trouble throughout a long period of time for a huge group of people. They are just coming around the exact same time that you would expect people to come. It's just that it might sound a little more scummy since they are intentionally finding a way to cut in front of the first train. Which arguably, if they get rid of the overnight group, I feel like this group of people are gonna like increase in number in one way or another. So in the end, it might still be an issue because of the fact that if they just stayed 4:30, you could easily just rent a hotel in the area, stay in your hotel till like 4:20, just walk down and just join the queue as well, since there is no specification in the rules that you have to come by first train or something. But arguably, this are still causing just a little more of an issue than the people coming by first train. Basically, during the period of time from when the last train ends for the previous day, so basically once all the people who have come to camp have arrived, and when the first train hits, there's that few hour period. So this is really just the issue of like people who arrive slightly before the 4:30 crew arrive, and then decide that rather than camp around somewhere and hide, they just enter the queue straight away, and then this just increases over time until like they're just people arriving all throughout the night in spite of the fact that all forms of transportation have ended. With these people, it's a little bit different the way they're doing things. A lot of them, typically what they do is either they are renting a hotel nearby, so they will come in to the event, put down their bags, and then just go back and sleep, or they are just camping out at a mall nearby until after midnight, when they will start to like walk towards the event venue, or they just find some other place to loiter so they don't look like they're coming to camp overnight, although they technically still are. It's just that they are causing slightly less of a disruption compared to people who come in at like 7 p.m. the previous day and basically jam up some of the roads within the area. So while they are somewhat closer and similar to the people coming overnight in the sense that they are still camping over for part of the night, they're doing on a slightly less problematic scale, although the fact that when they arrive in the area, they are probably camping out in some other building or mall somewhere or loitering somewhere means they might be causing disruptions for other people as well. And so this is really the part of the whole like list where we're going to go into people who are arguably more on the dark side than on the grey side of the scale. So the next two groups of people we're going to be talking about are the people who come on or before the last train of the day, before the day of the event they want to attend, and they just camp throughout the night. These are the people who are known as the overnight group or the Tetsuyagumi. And the reason why I'm splitting them into two different groups is due to the fact that the people who arrive the day before, the magnitude in terms of the amount of time they arrive earlier than they should varies to such a huge extent that it feels like it might be a bit better to split them, because you have the people who arrive at night when there isn't really anyone for them to cause trouble for, and then you have the people who arrive like somewhere in the midday, which is about 4 p.m. and like the people who just sit in a corner in FPS games and just pop you in the head with a sniper rifle. These people aren't exactly very well liked, And it's no surprise because not only are they breaking the rules of the event, what they're doing is quite likely illegal as well. And they are likely to be causing issues for many other people as a result of all of this as well. Especially those who come at midday, like 4 p.m. the day before, essentially causing issues not just for the people who need to police them, but for the normal run-of-the-mill people who are within the area as well, because these convention centers, they aren't exactly in the middle of nowhere. It's within Odaiba area, which there are many touristy attractions as well as construction sites within that area. So by forming queues in these areas, they are causing active disruptions during more social times of the day as well. So we're splitting them like this. People who come at night, still horrible, but not as horrible as people who come in the afternoon the day before, and split like that. So funnily enough, this is where we begin to go into what the YouTuber himself seemed very unfamiliar with when he made the video where he went down to scold these people, which is the fact that, yes, all of this is actually policed by staff of the Comiket organization committee itself. However, these are a group of staff that they will never recognize as actually existing, but well, if you actually have camped over multiple times before in the past, you would notice that it's always the same few faces, and you would then come to also find out that many of these people are actually working for the organization committee, although in a sense in secret. They are like your super spies in your movies who get disavowed if they get found out in that sense. And the reason why they are there is because of the fact that the committee knows of the inevitability of having to deal with these people who come overnight, because by virtue of the fact that it has been an issue for such a long time, they know that it will be very difficult for them to get rid of all of this. And instead of doing that, what they have decided to do is to police these people and like crowd control them to make sure that they cause as minimal of a disruption for the people in the area as possible. So you might be wondering even then, like, well, but is that really enough to prove that they are technically staff as well? Well, there's also the fact that these people are able to actively communicate with the security guards within the building who are there to prevent trespass, to smoothen out the process of crowd controlling, which doesn't seem like something that a bunch of randos can easily just do like that. And there's also the fact that these people have access to some parts of the compound itself for the use of the crowd controlling. So the way all of this works is that when everyone first arrives at the location itself, it doesn't matter whether you come from Ariake, which is nearer to the east side of the convention center, or you arrive at the main train station, which is the west side, everyone will be moved first to a road all the way at the back of the event location, and they will start lining people along the sides of the roads there, snaking all the way down. And then once it reaches around 10 p.m, they would basically make everyone march, where you just go down and you walk around the entire circumference of the entire convention center, all the way until you get back to the East Hall. And then somehow they have access to get everyone into the East Car Park, where they would then line everyone up in the East Car Park until like 3 a.m. plus 4 a.m. And then they start moving them out towards wherever they need to be instead. The fact that they can crowd control people to this extent and not get everyone chased out by the security and on location as trespassers does seem to hint towards the fact that these people probably have some level of pull or, relation to the people who are organizing the event. Otherwise, this wouldn't be as easy as it is. Then there's also the fact that the East Car Park, where they initially lead people through, actually locked on days where there are no events as well, especially at night. So it's not like it's just always open so people can just walk through and park humans in there instead. It was intentionally left open, and it's being used for crowd control. So when it comes to this group of people, obviously they're causing quite a bit of trouble as well, not just for the people who are there to crowd control them, the security that's there to ensure they don't trespass, but also all the people living within the area who have to deal with a huge amount of people just marching around. But the thing is that many of them, once everything settles down, when they're put in the car park and they are told they can go walk around until like 8:30 the next day, many of them start to then either squat in areas outside of this area, like they might just go to a nearby convenience store or like the first floor of apartment building and just lie there and sleep instead, or they might just move out to some other areas and cause more issues through their loitering, or like going to a convenience store and just chatting loudly while talking with their friends there. There's also the fact that most of these people probably should be touching grass, but due to the fact that they live in a city where the best place they can get grass that isn't in a park is like 1 hour, 2 hour train rides away, they just don't do it enough than they ought to be doing. Though on a more serious note, a big reason why many of these people who camp overnight or come at very illegal times of the day do it is not so much because they see the idea of going overnight as something that they personally enjoy, but because of the fact that the event does not do a good enough job to prevent the abuses of the people who try to cut in line well enough. And so people in their desperation start to do this. Yeah, they're probably causing more trouble for everyone overall than the people who come on the first train or just before it. But the thing is, we're still barely halfway done. There's still way more happening that we still have not talked about yet. Right, so the next group of people we're going to talk about, and this is starting to go into the parts that I feel like many people overseas also don't know existed back then, because many people within Japan who attended Comiket also never heard of the fact that all of this existed. And in the video that one YouTuber made, he was also very surprised and in disbelief. Like, he even thought they were lying when they told him about this thing. And this is the fact that there are people at the front of the overnight queue, in front of all these people who come on the day itself to camp, who have a ticket that allows them to get to the front in a specific ordered position. This is real. It has been happening for the longest of times. And what basically happens is that 3 days before the first day of the event itself, through one form or another of social media, they will, as in the people who are organizing all of this, would basically put out a location where all of these people who want to get to the front of the queue will have to gather at on the day itself. So on that day, all of these people will go down to that location and will just sit on the ground and be berated by the people who are giving out the numbers, telling them that, like,
hey, you know you guys are breaking the rule, right? You know you're doing a bad thing, right? You should all be ashamed of yourselves. Don't cause more trouble for people than you're already doing now, alright? And stuff like that.
Classic stuff that all people who camp overnight have to deal with, except these people have to deal with it twice. So what happens is that around the time where the last train ends for the day, so around 11 to 2 a.m, somewhere within that mark, I think in the YouTuber's video they mentioned 2 a.m, at a park near to Big Side itself. And once the committee has decided that everyone has been fully gathered, they will then call everyone, ask them to sit down, and then they will go around and like tap the shoulders of the people who have been selected to receive one of the tickets, and then they'll just give them a numbered ticket which they would then use on the day itself to get into the position in the line where they're meant to be. I don't know if it changed in the later years, but to put into perspective how insane this was, I think they used to give out like 1,000 tickets, and each ticket entitled you to bring another 19 people with you. So essentially, in the worst possible case, these people who came 3 days in advance to queue for the ticket could bring up to a group that would number in like 20,000 to be at the very forefront of the queue to enter Big Side before all the people who came on the day itself to camp. They're essentially doing everything that the people who come overnight do in terms of causing trouble for others. And on top of that, they have the camping overnight 3 days before DLC, harassment of more people, where they essentially cause trouble for the people who have to go down there to give out the tickets and all that, as well as all the trouble they cause by camping out in a random park in the middle of Japan. Because, you know, the homeless people, they like to gather in these parks to rest in the night. So by doing this, they just taking up space that the homeless people could actually use to get some rest. It's a little evil if you think about it. And so when an item sells out before even the people in the normal overnight queue can sometimes get there, you know, you can kind of imagine that that might be the case if it's popular enough and there are like, you know, 20,000 people in the queue ahead of everyone else. But here's the thing, even if you did somehow, as a whoever, decide to do this and you got into the line in front of everyone else who camped overnight, who came on the first train, who spent 40 minutes cycling there hoping they don't get hit by a car, who came like a normal person and like a social hour of the day, even if you beat every single one of them, you're the guy at the front with the first ticket, the Willy Wonka Gold 1 ticket, right? You're still not the first. there are still people in front of these people because this list, this insanity just goes on and never ends. But before we get into that, I just want to put another group of people slightly lower in the tier, and these are the people who, kind of like with the previous pair of groups, kind of related to the group that's just before it. And these are the people who are not only actively participating in this 3-day prior or 2-day prior, depending on the year, camp to get the earlier overnight ticket, but the people who are essentially forming groups or trying to profiteer off this situation, because obviously you can bring people with you, so that's great if you have a lot of friends or you have a lot of other comrades who you want to go with and ensure that you can all get your stuff. But the thing is that not everyone is just getting their friends in on the action. There are actually people who form groups who are essentially like some kind of organized smart runners or something. Either that or they're just plain scalpers who try to scalp the ticket. And what I mean by this is that, and there is a Twitter page that I found in the past, which I still have, and I'll link it down below, which you can take a look at, where there's this specific group, one of the many within the overnight group, which tries to gather people and, well, obviously like some kind of business that's trying to ensure mutual benefit, but they're essentially trying to rope in other people, strangers, to help to queue for the ticket count at the very start before the original day itself, and also to help queue on the day itself. So what they'll do is that they would try to recruit enough people to form like a, I don't want to use the word gang because it feels a little more offensive than what these people actually are. They're just like petty smart runners or something. But essentially they try to recruit enough people to form a group where you have the guy who gets the ticket, and then the guy who camps overnight for each of the days while the rest of the group comes in the morning to fill in the space with the guy. It's like they're really trying to maximize the number of people who can go to the front. And then aside from the groups that are doing this, there are also those that essentially try to sell their spaces they have with their tickets or to purchase someone else's empty slots. And the prices for this can go between anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 yen. Like, it really is quite a profitable situation if you get the ticket, because if you manage to bring in another 9 people and each one of them is willing to pay you like 5,000 yen, that's like your effort to go overnight for one day in and of itself is gonna net you like a 45,000 yen, which is around this much. So as you can see, it's a pretty decent amount of money considering the fact that you're not really putting any monetary investment into this aside from the ticket to get you to the park in the first place. But yeah, the reason why I rank these two groups lower than the individuals who are just camping there and maybe bring themselves and their friends in is due to the fact that they're essentially turning them breaking the rules and even the laws of the country on multiple occasions into a form of profiteering in that sense, because it doesn't matter whether they are outright getting money from this or they are trying to form a group with others. Unlike most of the other groups before them who were only queuing largely for personal gain, these people are pulling more people into breaking the same laws and rules as they are and creating an even bigger overnight early queue that will cause even more of a disruption, while also causing everyone down the line who had to come in early to queue to suffer even more in the heat than they otherwise would have had these people not intentionally dragged in more people like this for their own personal comfort and gain. So we're finally down to the last 2 floors of this horny weep hell. It's a bizarre thing, this whole journey we've been on till now, but these last 2 are extremely egregious in my opinion, because these are basically being perpetrated by people who are taking advantage or abusing the systems that are in place to make things better for everyone. They are no longer just people who are breaking rules, but circumventing the rules to put themselves in a much better position at the expense of the fact that they are taking advantage of the goodwill of the system that is built to ensure everyone has a good time and also causing trouble for everyone in the process. And more importantly, it's because these are the groups that people tend to either not know about or they are very rarely spoken about due to the fact that they're just a group that, while they do exist, you don't see them as often because typically these people are entering the event so early that most of us people who enter normally would never see them, and they will basically purchase everything that they want to before even the first overnight group enters the event location itself. So the first group, the 8th level, are the people who take advantage of the circle passes in one way or another. And circles are the doujin indie groups that are selling stuff at the event itself. And the way people take advantage of this come in a myriad of different ways. One would be that they would purchase a ticket from a circle that they have spare, because every circle is given a set number of tickets that they can use either for themselves or to bring in assistants to assist with the sales, the setup, the mascot to sell the items and all that. So some circles have an excess of tickets, and while a little shady, what they will sometimes do is sell off that ticket to recoup some of the losses or to even earn money from it, because the way these tickets work is that they allow you to enter the event way earlier than the normal attendees. And the thing is that because the staff understand that if you're going there to sell stuff, you probably don't have the time to run around the entire hall to explore it, because you'll be busy for most of the time yourself. And so they give circles a short amount of time to essentially go to the field that they want to quickly to maybe purchase something before the event starts, because obviously most people who are making art there would, even if they do not know someone personally, they might have other groups that they are fans of and might want to purchase stuff from. So a goodwill system in place for circles to ensure that they too can get the stuff they want is being abused in multiple ways. First of which is the one I just mentioned. People get a ticket from one of these circles and then they use it to quickly buy up as much stuff as they can before anyone else enters, either to scalp or to ensure that they just get what they want, though typically this is more used by scalpers from my understanding of the whole thing. Or, and this one is the even more scummy one, is the creation of what are called dummy circles, where essentially a group of people come together, pretend to be a circle, apply for a space, and then try to get it, go in and pretend that they couldn't finish their book in time. Because what happens is that sometimes obviously people prepare like something unique for this event, and there's always going to be a case or two of people who just didn't manage to, right? And the thing is, they already paid for the booth and they can't do anything about it, so they just go there with a sign saying, I'm sorry for being a fuck up or something. So they just go there to at least talk to the people who might have been looking forward to it, maybe apologize, give them some small other thing instead to apologize. But the thing is that there are some who would take advantage of the fact that you could just go there like this to instead just purchase a booth with the intent of not getting anything in the first place, bring in as many people as they can with them. And the thing is that you might think like, oh, but these people, while they're taking advantage of the system, they're not causing as much trouble for everyone else, right? I mean, they're not causing all of the overnight shit to happen, all of the additional cost, manpower and all that, so it's not as bad, right? Well, the thing is that first and foremost, they're taking away space from people who would actually genuinely have an interest in going to the event and producing something that they would hope others would like. And they're also taking away that space, and as a result giving people who go to the event less things that they can look forward to. On top of that, they're also abusing the system, and on top of that, there's also the fact that you could argue that it's because of these people as well that the whole idea of like Comiket overnight queuers even became as bad as it is in the first place. And we'll get more into this later on when we talk about the results of the newer system for Comiket entry, as well as why they didn't deal with all of these issues at the time. But yeah, the only real thing to say about these people is that the circle isn't the only thing that is a dummy there, right? Ha 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 ha. Yeah, horrible joke aside, this is one of the two groups at the near bottom that still exist even till this day. Like this and the one below it are the only ones that still exist to this day, even spite of the fact that overnight and most of the others have been eradicated by the changes in the system as a result of the pandemic. So this is another reason why they're all the way at the bottom, because they still need to burn while everyone else is already no longer in existence to burn. So the last one is pretty much the same as the circle, but on another level, because essentially these are the people who abuse the tickets that are given to staff to do the same thing. So obviously staff are gonna be even more busy than the circles, because once the circle sells out of staff, they're done for the day. But for the staff, they will always have stuff to do, and as a result, they don't have as much time to go around the event. You're probably going to be like work, eat lunch, work. And the thing with all of this stuff is that all of them are volunteers. Like, no one is actually getting paid for any of this. You have to understand. All of them are doing this, or at least most of them, maybe not all, are doing it out of the goodness of their heart. And I've known a few of the staff members as well, the volunteers, due to the fact that they sometimes do hire foreign staff as well. And some of the time this is due to the fact they need translators or whatnot, or just due to the fact that they're short-handed. And as a result, one of the things I've heard from them is the fact that in the past, you did have people as well who would essentially either reach out to a staff to get their ticket to go around and shop, or they would essentially try to do something even more illegal, like to photocopy it, to pretend that they should have been inside to begin with, like getting the passes and all that, pretending to be the staff member and trying to bring themselves into the event alongside the other staff members. And the thing with this is that due to the way all of this works, these people are gonna get away with it if they don't get caught with a lot more ease than everyone else, because with a circle, you kind of can tell that they're not doing their job. But with a ticket, a pass like this, unless they're keeping very good track of the number of times the pass is being used to pass around the locations within the different halls, you won't really know that this one ID pass is being used by like 6 different people across 6 different halls, so they can purchase stuff out as quickly as they can across all of these locations. And more importantly, it's just the fact that there's a very big like trust issue going on here, right? Like the fact that you know that the staff themselves are all basically being given the advantage to be the first ones in the queue if they so wanted to, and the fact that there are people who are abusing all of this and the system is still not really all that fixed to prevent all of this from happening, and the fact that people can just easily sell the pass to use to enter beforehand to purchase stuff to other people as well without being easily caught, it does bring in a bit of a issue of the integrity of the people who are organizing the event themselves, right? Because these people, like, well, I get that, you know, they are human too, they would also want to get the stuff. It also doesn't feel all that right that they are essentially operating this event, and while they are not getting paid for it, with the added benefit of being able to basically buy out stuff before most people enter. Like, if you were gonna tell me that the staff split the shifts of their work properly so that the people can 50-50 split and run around the event during the times that everyone else is, that sounds kind of fair. But the fact that they are at the forefront of everyone else buying out the stuff, basically screwing over everyone down the line, doesn't matter whether you're overnight or first train, it kind of feels like as a result of their own actions, they are causing these groups to be as desperate as they are as well. So can't really say I agree all too much with the fact that this system is the way it is, but then again, I'm not an events manager or professional in the field, so maybe there isn't a better way to do it and I'm just being naive and thinking there is. So the fact that the system that has been built for staff to get their stuff is being abused by other people who should not be able to be in that position in the first place, the people who are abusing it. We'll leave the staff out of it for now, but just talk about the fact that both these circles in the 8th layer and the staff in the 9th layer, they are people who are abusing the tickets from these two groups to enter the event in a more advantageous position. And these people who do abuse it in such a way, they do belong in the bottom here, I would say. So that about wraps up each of the individual layers of this experience that used to exist in the past. Let's talk about now why this was never fixed. Obviously, the actual committee themselves never really gave a proper response to this, the reason being that they have always denied the existence of these groups, as well as the existence of the staff that are in charge of managing these groups. And the thing is that in the actual catalog itself, they always have a segment making fun of the people who would do this, even though they say they don't exist and they don't like appreciate the fact or recognize these people as being at the front of the queue, but at the same time these people are still at the front of the queue getting in first. So it really feels like a case of like the little kid who calls the bully like, ha ha, you fat, and the moment the bully tries to punch him, he just goes like, eh, and just hides and runs away instead. So I can't really say that like they are doing a very good job to begin with. In fact, it makes it feel kind of suspect the way all of this is being done. Obviously, many people have given many different types of copium rationalizations for why they believe this is happening. Some say that even if the committee didn't do anything, these people would still loiter either way. And there are also people who say that the reason why these groups are not punished is due to the fact that because these groups are so big, if they were to try to punish them by like shifting them somewhere else as like a gotcha moment at the very end, it wouldn't really be realistically possible because there are so many people that they would inadvertently cause a jam instead. Because if these people at that point decide to like bail, or worst case they just flee when you tell them you're gonna fuck them up, then it's like the committee themselves can't really do anything about those people trying to run away, and instead them trying to move all of these people out of that location after all of this has happened, coupled with all the people who will be suddenly like stampeding away, might actually cause even more danger and delay the event by much more, and that's why they don't want to do it. Personally, to me, all of this rationalization sounds like very big copium. It really does feel like a case of the fact that there's just simply too much shadiness going on in the background that they did not get rid of at an early enough point, and because they allowed this to fester for long enough, thinking it might not be that much of an issue, that it did reach a critical mass where they could no longer easily deal with it without recognizing the fact that they have been effectively lying to people for more than 10 years at this point, 20 perhaps, since this goes back all the way to C like 80 or something. Like, this has gone on for a long time, the whole idea of people queuing overnight, so it would expose the fact that they have been lying to people for a long time, which will hurt their credibility, which might then result in them earning less money to continue running the event as people choose not to attend, boycott it or something, as advertisers pull out, number of corporate booths that go decide not to go as well. Because really things like the crowd being too big or people coming at the first train, it's gonna cause like a lot of safety hazards. So the fact that all of this is even allowed to happen in the first place feels very odd. And the thing is that if they really wanted to fix it, it feels like if they had taken like maybe 1 or 2 Comikets to hit the nail on the head as hard as possible to ensure that these people who are breaking the rules are eliminated once and for all, it would be a long-term benefit to everyone, as it would have shown everyone that yes, they are taking the necessary steps to do it, and this would in turn turn people away from actually taking part in such a way, and therefore reduce the number of people that are constantly doing this, rather than them allowing this to fester and there being an upward trend in the number of people queuing overnight year after year. That's why the best thing that could have been done since the very start would have been regulation at an early stage before it got out of hand, but for some reason it was allowed to fester to this point where instead of regulating it, they have come to accept that this thing is there and have a regulating body to ensure it operates fine on its own rather than having a full-on regulation to remove it. It's a bit of a strange thing, but that was the world we used to live in back then. So up to this point, I think I've done a pretty decent, at least, job of explaining how horrible the queuing used to be in the past, how people used to queue overnight in the worst of weathers in summer and winter, only to enter the event like sweaty and smelly, like worse than the greaseballs who go to Anime Expo in America and who haven't bathed for like weeks on end. Even in spite of all of this though, the funny thing is the fact that the change that everyone had been hoping for, well, everyone aside from the scalpers who probably hate the fact that they can't scalp as hard anymore, but aside from them, the thing that everyone else had been hoping for, which was the change to the system that would get rid of this overnight queue, it finally came. But it came in the worst way possible, which was in the form of COVID-19. Yeah, To think that the only thing that could force the committee that was running Comiket to finally decide that they wanted to change these systems, the one thing that could do it had to be a devastating pandemic. It's really sad. Like, it really is. As a result, the way the systems work now are very different. Now the systems have turned into the equivalent of a World of Warcraft subscription, where in order to play the game of entering Comiket, you need to pay money for a ticket to enter. And if you wanted to enter way earlier, you were paying way more than the average person. So like the average person might pay like 1,000 yen. The person who wishes to enter way early has to pay like 5,000 yen instead. There is this disparity in the ticket prices, so you could say that we've been turning into more and more of a capitalist society as well when it comes to the most wholesome of events for a hobby. It's kind of sad, but at least this system got rid of the overnight queues and the first train as well altogether, which is kind of funny. Like, people have been celebrating the fact that this has gotten rid of the overnight crowd, and yeah, it's great. Like, I'm actually really genuinely happy that all of that is now gone, but they seem to neglect the fact that this technically also removes the people who come by first train. Like, it in that sense, it kind of shows that the people who came by first train were also kind of a nuisance in the first place, weren't they? Considering the fact that now there is no longer a need for people to do that either, and that the concept of a more wholesome event where everyone can go at a reasonable time of the day and enjoy the event in its fullness instead of feeling like shit after slipping on a rocky floor for like 12 hours or something. The best idea for the event that exists now also does not include the first train. I feel like it speaks volumes as well. Although some people might say, but you still can't come by the first train, it's not against the rules. Yeah, you could, but there's no point in doing it. Literally, okay, the first and only time I've ever been the first person in the queue in Comiket was in Comiket 99, and that was me literally being at the very, very front of the queue. They randomly started gathering people for the queue at a random location where I just happened to be standing with my friend, and the both of us just followed and were just at the front of the queue. So literally no point to come at 4 a.m. or 4:30 rather, when you can just arrive at 6 and just randomly end up in the front of the queue. Okay, like, this is the picture here, taken by the Comiket community themselves. Unfortunately, due to the fact that they censored it, you can't really see my face, but you can see my boots at the bottom here. See, these are my boots. This was the jacket I was wearing on the day itself. Imagine this on my feet, and I was like, there like this, This was all me back then over there in the picture that you see. Now, you don't really have to queue as much anymore, because even the earliest queues start at like 6:30, which is a vast improvement since you queue like 2 hours less compared to how you would have if you assume everyone came by the first train. And since the way the queues are organized is by blocks, basically every hour block they would reorganize a separate part of the queue. So if they told you your queue was at like 9 a.m, you didn't have to arrive till 9 a.m, and you'd still be fine because they don't form the queue until 9 a.m. So a lot of this just became more tolerable, and then as a result of the fact that you don't feel as fatigued entering the event, you can enjoy it more. And it's the reason why, especially now, I'm quite glad to be making those other videos where I talk about like the interesting stuff you can find at Comiket, because with how much it has changed now, it is as good a time as any to actually be visiting the event. Preferably now, before the event actually dies in the future, because it does seem like attendance and number of attending circles is slowly decreasing. But aside from that, now it does feel like the best time to go, and you can enjoy a lot better the huge variety of stuff that the event has to offer. That's it. If you thought this was going to solve all of the event's issues, like some kind of miracle scam cure like Gwyneth Paltrow's Juice Cleanse or something, like the Juice Cleanse, you are being scammed into thinking that if you really believe that all of the issues are gone now. Instead, what actually happened is that there has actually been an uptick in the number of people who have been purchasing into circle tickets, either of like black market resales or dummy circles, or buying like staff tickets or something. The number of people who have been doing that has seen a significant uptick, it would seem, according to reports online as well. So it's not so much that they managed to solve all of the problems, it's more like the problems got shifted down to the lower levels of hell instead. That is another issue that it feels like still needs some level of fixing, but for now, at the very least, we are living in a much better situation than the way the event used to be back in the past in terms of the queuing. Though that brings me to the end of this whatever this video is, on why the queues in Comiket in the past used to be so insane. I feel like this hopefully will make for a good time capsule more so than anything else. Like, all of these things I feel like will never be something that we'll see ever again, depending on how Comiket decides to proceed from here on out. So these are a lot of things that people on the Japanese internet have speculated, talked about, investigated for the longest of times without any concrete or solid proof, because most of these people criticize the system but have never experienced it the way I have. So as someone who has experienced all of it, who has cycled to beat the first train, who has taken the first train, who has come at 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 p.m. even the day of the event itself when there's nothing to see anymore, who has queued overnight, who I've not purchased any other like circle or staff tickets though, that's a little too much for me. Never really camped as one of the people in the first like ticketed parts of the overnight either, but as someone who knows and has spoken to people, volunteers who have witnessed all of that happen and who has experienced most of the other forms of ways of entering Comiket, including actually being at the park when they tap the people, even though I didn't get picked, I can tell you with certainty that most, if not all, of that is not speculation, it's a fact that it did happen. And while it will never happen going forward from here, hopefully ever again, this is a nice way to cap off how, no, the past wasn't all good times. If you're one of those people that's going to be like, I preferred back in the day when Comiket was this and that. No! Okay, no. It's better now for everyone who isn't a scalper. Or it will be once they fix the whole issue with people buying circle and staff tickets. But even then, we are still in a better position than people were back during like Comiket 80, 95, 96 and all that. So hopefully you guys see better why I am so positive for the way the event is now, in spite of the fact that I do recognize that having to pay for a ticket does suck. After hearing all of this, hopefully. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what this video is becoming at the end of the video, but yeah, this was more or less just a talk of all the things I've experienced. Like, I can even tell you where the best toilets to go are, to find one where there's no one there. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is and stuff like this, because it's a little cringe. But hey, that's it. We're at the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching till this point. Hope it was enjoyable to you guys. Thanks to the wonderful efforts of Snolexo, we now also have a Discord. I'm still thinking of what stuff to add to it as well, since I'm not too sure what might be interesting to also have on it. But for the most part, we're just using it as a place to chill and shitpost. So if you wanna just chill with us, just feel free to drop right in. I'm planning to add my video upload schedule to some extent up there as well, so you guys can more or less get a rough idea of what I'm planning for at least like 1 or 2 months into the future. Maybe the stream schedule, though I don't know how much that'll be interesting to people. But if you guys want to hang out, that's a place you can consider. I can't think of a good enough joke for this. But either way, really thanks to Snolexo for helping to set this all up. With my small old man brain, it's a little tough at times. But now we can at least get this off the tracks, road. I mean, if it's gonna be in space, I mean in the net, it's not gonna be on the road anyway, but you know what I mean. Anyway, do feel free to check that out if you want to join us. Link is in the description down below. Anyway, I'll be heading off now. Once again, if you happen to enjoy any of this, give it a like. If you happen to want to see the rest of the stuff I make typically, like videos about games or the game industry or whatever, do feel free to subscribe. I'll be heading off now. So, take care and